let's start the session. So, Walid, you want to start off?
Okay, sure. First of all, thank you, Mark, for organizing all of this and for the support as usual. One of our greatest partnership is with a guy like you, with your company, with consultation. And I know we have, alhamdulillah, together we have done some good successes that we could discuss later. This is a brief about myself. I think so that most of the people who are in Saudi and knows me, so I will not take a lot of their time because they have seen me and I have bothered them in WhatsApp more than once, and so they know who's the headache in Saudi about customer experience. For the friends who are internationally, I'm Walid Al Hamdan, CEO of Business Way. I have a good experience in customer experience and customer service for the past 20 years and above. Alhamdulillah, I have very great partnerships. One of them with the great guy that I'm meeting today.
Who's that?
He's. I hope he doesn't get a bigger head than mine these days with all of this happening, and I hope everyone is safe. Mark, you could introduce yourself for everybody also.
Yeah, absolutely. I will go through. So thank you very much for making this happen. So this is actually sponsorship by Business Way, our partner in Saudi. Obviously, a great organization when it comes to customer experience, contact center solutions and IT solutions over there. And as you said, we have been working for many years together on a whole range of really interesting assignments in CX and CX strategy and KPI systems. But a little bit about kind of like what we're trying to do today and where we're coming in. So I've been invited by Walid as part of a series of webinars that Business Way is hosting to talk about customer experience measures. And when we were talking through what is really kind of like going on, very quickly it became obvious that there are a lot of questions out there in regards to customer experience KPI and the changes that are taking place right now with COVID, whether the old measures still make sense or whether fundamental changes are required. So we came up with some ideas on what we wanted to talk about, and we named it therefore today's session, the new normal of CX measures and how COVID impacts CX and satisfaction measures and what companies need to change now. Because we truly believe that changes are necessary to make sure that customer experience is managed well, continue to be managed well, and structured and adding the value into the organization that it's supposed to add. So how we will do that, I will do the introductions from my end in a moment as well, and from KCA, my company. We will then talk about the new normal, what it actually means in the customer service space and how significant actually this change is. We will then talk a little bit about the KPIs and a quick recap on what a KPI is and is supposed to be, because sometimes we kind of miss the point on that. We will then talk a little bit about customer experience measures and how customer experience can be measured and what should actually be measured. And then a couple of 5-6 steps, really what should be done. So I try to get through this whole thing in about 35, maximum 40 minutes. And then we will go through question and answers to open the floor, because there will for sure be questions out there after this session. For those that know me, and I saw a lot of familiar names and of friends in the attendee list, you know that I'm quite controversial in my views and quite different. So there will probably be some questions coming up afterwards in which direction to go. So that's the idea. Walid, yeah?
Okay, good. So we are now. Let's talk about. I think so. A brief about KCA, an introduction about yourself, and introduction about the company. If you would like to give us an idea, who's KCA, what achievements that and milestones. I think so. This will take the hour, but try to minimize it, if you please.
I'll try to keep it very short. I'll try to keep it very short. But yes, so while sitting here, so I have to a great extent in your shoes somewhere along the line as well in many different areas. a little bit about myself. So I started off in financial services. So I have been with Citibank for 17 years in total. So I started off in branch banking in Citibank Germany, then went into the US, worked for the international banking division as the quality manager, operations manager, quality manager, project programs, you name it. So in the end, I ended up being the deputy IT head for the Latin American business there. I then returned back to Germany. I'm initially German. Became the quality director or quality manager and internal control manager for the Visa card and MasterCard acquiring business out of Germany. And then I went over to London, became the operations director for Diners Club for 9 countries out there, but pretty much doing a transformational management for them. After that, I came to this region, worked for Emirates MBD. So I was the head of group service quality for Emirates MBD to literally transform the service culture and the customer experience management on it, and actually we were successful in turning that around. And then when I left Emirates MBD, I started KCA Consultants, a boutique consultancy on service strategy, quality management, customer experience management, and corporate strategy in general. So we do a lot of trainings and so on. I've done a lot of stuff in regards to certification. So I am a quality manager by nature. So I'm a Six Sigma Black Belt, certified quality manager. I have my Lean certification from accreditation from McKinsey. I'm a CCXP, customer experience, certified customer experience professional. I am an ISO 9000 lead auditor, PMI and Prince2 certified. I'm accredited by Kaplan Norton Balanced Scorecard. And I have an executive MBA from London Business School in brand management, as well as a BBA in finance and banking from Frankfurt Business School. I was teaching a while, so I was teaching at Holt as the professor of operations and IT management. Then went over to Middlesex University, was teaching there in project management and innovation management. And for the last years, and on top of the work at KCA, I'm doing a lot of work with the Dubai Quality Award and Dubai Human Development Award. So I'm administering the system now as well, and have also been awarded by ASQ as the Quality Professional of the Year in 2018. Last year, or actually 2 years ago, we got the accreditation as a CXBA recognized training provider. So we were the first one globally to receive that accreditation, therefore also the first one in this region. And we do a lot of trainings around that. And then recently, to keep myself busy as well, I've been co-authoring 2 books, one on customer experience and another one on remote working, because obviously the COVID situation has taken a lot of toll. So that's pretty much the reason why I'm sitting over here and talk to you a little bit about the changes as well as the implications inside CX and service quality. As Walid said, we have with a lot of companies. So this is a small section out here. So it's predominantly in the GCC at the moment, but we have done work internationally as well. But we're usually targeting blue chips or larger organizations that really care about customer experience. And it's not only financial services, but literally any type of organization. So if you have a customer, we have very likely worked already with you at that particular point. So that's a little bit about us as KCA and and myself. So Walid, have I forgotten anything on this?
Only one of the projects that really made a difference for the automotive sector, if you remember, that the great 7 months that we really did a huge thing in that area, and really made a difference to myself personally in that era, and which was as they say, the push for me to start my own business after that, to understanding exactly how the market is especially in Saudi here, is in hunger and need of something like that, with especially partners who are internationally, we really appreciate to really build and be the hub for them here in Saudi to support all organizations. Yes, يعني I'm sure يعني more than one here we have done. The success stories, if we're more than happy to discuss it with everyone here. But let us, what do you think? Let us, يعني the name of the subject that we're going to talk about, I really liked it. And when we was discussing it, which is the new normal, يعني it changed. يعني if we go back, let's say, just in a glimpse of an eye and say, okay, on July last year, everyone was thinking to take a vacation. Everyone thinking was, okay, now I need to go. I need to go to the office to do something. Customer service and customer experience was totally measured in a different level, measured in a different way. The transformation I'm talking, especially in Saudi, and I could see it in all the GCC region, the difference in the push for the transformation in technology. You could see it in UAE, you could see it in Saudi and Kuwait and all of the GCC countries and Arab countries which are close to us. How it really, as they say, a shock that really waked everyone. That okay, this is something you need to understand. That the normal, the regular thing that you used to do, now it's changed. This is not the way that you need to do work. This is not the day. And you could really minimize it by utilizing a lot of things and minimizing it with even the cost. So all of that, if we go to the customer experience level, the measurement now changed at the same time, because usually he was measuring, okay, you could see him, is he smile or he's not smiling, is he happy or not happy, because there is a way that the client comes and you could really adjust it. Now you cannot adjust it. If he goes to Twitter or on his social platform, you are killed over there, because he will really give you a rumor like nobody else. And you could, for the past, let's say 2 weeks, you saw, and you know what's happening on the social and what's happening for Facebook, what's happening on Twitter. Just only a fight that just happened with big organizations over there. So let's start, I think so, and let's say how did it change, Mark? What do you see is changing?
As you said, everything has changed significantly on this one. So as Walid actually said out here, when we kind of like reviewed and checked what is going on with this new normal, is we had already problems with our customer experience and satisfaction KPIs beforehand. And we knew that it was not perfect, and we knew there were a lot of problems with our KPIs. But now, actually, it's not only that we have a significant impact, but what really happened out here is that we have a great opportunity because everyone expects change and everyone understands that things have to be changed in the organization. So COVID actually also has opened a window of opportunity to fix all our fundamental issues that we have out here. However, and this is kind of like the bad news that will probably come, and spoiler alert here, the bad news that will come out of this meeting is not only the KPIs. The KPIs are only the tail end of what needs to be changed. The strategies need to be reviewed as well. And I'll kind of like draw that conclusion, or kind of like that line over during this talk as well. So let me give you a couple of examples on what ultimately has happened out here. So it was a big shock. Before, when we were looking at our customer experience system and what was kind of like happening out here, we were ultimately asking the question inside our boards or inside our CX units, and we said, okay, we understand what the goal is. For example, we want to have happy customers, but we were struggling on putting the right strategies in there. How would we actually do that? And that was kind of like the focus where we were, and we like used the CX measures at the end. But now with COVID really coming in, what happens is that we very often struggle, and we're being asked now, what should the new goal be? Is the goal retention of our customers? Is it strengthening the relationship? Is it a transformational system? Do we say CX is important, but in reality, the strategy is all about cost cutting and staying in business in the first place? So what we see right now is that many organizations that have been known for being excellent in customer experience management have completely slacked off. And I mean, I have many examples of that. One that I personally experienced was with Emirates Airlines. We had flights scheduled in April where our sons were supposed to travel, and the flights were canceled. And the experience that we went through in order to not only get the money back, but kind of like to run through and not being taken advantage of, or kind of like the communication channels, the interaction was completely not in line with what we had experienced with that brand before. So the point that I want to make out here is, well, we all look now is like, how can we adjust? Very often facing now the situation that really the rug has been pulled out of our or from under our feet, where we don't even know anymore, is the strategy that we build our CX programs, that we build our KPI system, that we build our intelligence and we build our customer base on, is that actually still in existence or not? Now, that ultimately means we need to go to the core of what has happened. And COVID really made a lot of people question what is important in life and what is not. So we're all talking about like essential work, or what is really important, what is not. Whereas before it was all about like showing off and brands and kind of like the achieving the highest level. Really what we have seen is a reset back to the basics. So we see a lot of customers that are resetting their expectations to say, yes, it's nice that I drive maybe kind of like a good brand car, but if I can't drive it at all because we're in lockdown, what good does it take me? So if I'm not even sure that tomorrow my health insurance will actually pay for the test, it will, if I'm fully covered. What will happen if I cannot go to work? What happens if all of a sudden I cannot go for shopping? Maybe the products that I need, maybe the medicine that I need are not available anymore. So all of a sudden, some very fundamental questions were coming in, and we see a significant discrepancy now in what the focus of CX was before to what we're now going into, what impacts our customer experience, because it's really going back down to the very basic needs of the customers. And in that essence, therefore, when a reset of basic needs and expectations of customers take place, we now need to make a shift in our customer experience measures and the way how we actually look through. So just literally today, and I changed a lot of this stuff that was in this presentation over today, because just today a new research came out, which was performed by Customer Experience Magazine, What's International, and Access in Dubai. And this is actually UAE data that I'm showing you, but it's very close to what I've seen in Saudi as well. And some of the results that actually came out were that 74% of the people that were surveyed here actually said that they see a significant impact in their business and in their work. 70% said that there's a negative impact in social. So the face-to-face is not there anymore. So we see a significant shift now into new modes of communication. What kind of like the marketing and all the likes in the world couldn't do for 10 years for us, all of a sudden COVID changed, and everyone wants to be and has to be to some extent digital and have a better communication and presence online. 65% of the people said that their travel plans had changed. And Walid mentioned that before. A year ago, by this time, people would start to go on vacation and leave early from school to kind of like beat the rush in the airports. Right now, the question is, in Dubai, for example, I have lost my job. Can I leave the country? Am I on the waiting list to actually make one of the repatriation flights? 52% actually said that they have a negative impact on their financial situation, which means that is maybe the potential market size or kind of like the spend that we're expecting from our clients taking place. For banks, and I know there, I saw some of the attendees from banks out here. Will that have an impact on the non-performant loans? Will that have an impact on the perception for insurances? What type of insurances are required? What will we need to do? The labor market is significantly impacted. The malls, the footfall in retail. So we do see a significant impact on the paths out there. 33% of the people actually said that their investment plans have been affected, positive or negative, but there is a significant impact in there on how much people will invest in the future or not. But the most striking number that actually came out is that only 4% said that there is no impact. The number of 4%, I mean, let's put that into perspective. It is actually 1 in 25 people is actually saying, I will not see any impact. So this is an absolute unprecedented situation. We have not seen something like this in the past. That means that there's a significant impact on virtually all of us. So do we have a new normal? Absolutely. We have to do something? Absolutely. So when we look into kind of like what that meant for the behaviors and what therefore becomes into the focus, half a year ago, before the whole COVID actually started up, you probably remember darkly, there was like a person called Greta Thunberg. She was kind of like doing this whole environmental change and kind of like the drive for more sustainability. But even though I'll talk about COVID, what the respondents in the survey actually said, that 51% actually said that they're absolutely more environmentally aware because they see that it's about the survival aspect, about kind of like it's not only about COVID, but about the impact that we have on the environment in general. 73% said that the hygiene standards significantly have increased, and therefore the expectations for everyone to have um, uh, more clean premises, to have actually sanitation approaches and so on. 67% said that they actively avoid physical contact, which means that they're more careful with interactions, but also they're looking for contactless experiences. So, for example, in payment aspects. 58% said that they're putting much more priority on savings. So they're not spending out, but they saw that bad times can happen from one day to the other. So for banks, that will mean that's less consumption loans, for example, going out, but there will be more savings opportunities, for example, or insurance products to be possible to be sold. So we will see a shift in what type of products will be sold and bought. And one striking number, I mean, for me, coming from a credit card and banking background here as well, 76% actually said that they prefer very strongly now contactless payments, where they actively avoid cash payments and go and literally have increased significantly what regulators try to do for ages to move more towards a cashless society. So when we're looking at all those changes that are in there, the basic categories of customer needs, reliability, responsiveness, competence, access, courtesy, communication, credibility, security, customer understanding, intangibles, they have not really changed. But the way how those needs of those customers are being met have significantly changed. So for example, access is not only the opening times or the ease of finding your branch has changed, but rather now we see kind of like a shift over to more digital channels. Customers are more open now to be offered self-service or aspects. So does that mean, for example, that kiosks or online will drive? Probably once the crisis goes a little bit lower and it goes not back to normal, but it goes back a little bit more on the easing of the restrictions. Yes, people will shift back into the branches, but not as much as it was before. So what we actually need to look now for is that the needs of the customers have become much more basics. We see more significant expectations on digital channels in regards to ease of finding it, ease of use, the overall experience part behind it, the whole contactless and integration of data, the speed that is behind it. The communication needs have significantly increased, and it's not only customers asking more difficult questions and want to have an answer. If they're worried, they want to have the answer, but it's also that they look more for proactive communication by the organizations to go out and even say if things are not going very well, they want to be kept informed. They want to know why that is happening so that they can build up the trust that you are forthcoming and that you are very close in meeting their expectations. And also, obviously, the special cases have emerged where everyone right now is feeling that they're special because for them it's something new. So for you, it might be something completely normal where a person now goes through an online channel where you say, well, guess what? A million other customers use that online channel as well. You're not special. The customer feels special because it's maybe for them the first time that they from a brick and mortar into an online channel. So the way of how we interact with customers has completely changed, and therefore also the expectation behind it. So that's the new normal behind it, but it actually means that the measurement and the way how we're actually approaching it has considerably changed as well. So let's look at the KPI, which is now the question, how do we have an impact on KPI? And it's, I believe, quite scary at times that a lot of time when we talk about KPIs, that there's a very strong misunderstanding what KPIs actually means. So let me refresh you a little bit on this one as well. This might be a repeat for you, but maybe there's some small nuggets in there that might be in there. So KPI means key performance indicator. And a lot of guys probably in this call right now, they're saying is like, duh, of course. But let's kind of like dissect this a little bit. It's key, perform, and indicator. So it means it's not a regular measure. What we're trying to do here is that it's actually a critical aspect. So it's not one of the run-of-the-mill items, but it has to be a special one that is absolutely key for the survival or for the business on a strategic level. It's an indicator. So it's never actually showing you precisely, potentially, what is going on, but rather it gives you indication in which direction something is going. So we cannot expect that every KPI is 100% spot on. Some of them are leading, some of them are lagging, but bottom line, they're an indicator for something else that is happening. And especially in CX, I'll come to that in a moment, we will never have direct measures of customer experience. We only have indirect measures, indicator measures for what is going on in customer experience. And then the last part, or the third part, is the performance aspect. So what we're actually looking for is a progress towards an intended result. So in order to have a KPI, we have to first identify what is really what we try to measure and what is the final goal and how close are we to that intended result. So unfortunately, a lot of KPIs have gone completely out of control. So assume you would have kind of like a car and you're driving around, have that many indicators in your dashboard. Actually, you do have them, but a lot of those indicators are blanked out most of the time because they're not relevant. Unfortunately, in our KPI systems or in our measurements and in our dashboards that we provide to senior management, virtually all of those KPIs are being shown because we feel they're important. But the problem here is that really we're losing out on helping to focus attention on what matters most. So by showing too many indicators, we lose out on the critical or the key part out here. They're indicators, but they're not key. The second part, what we therefore need to look for, is that we focus on truly important, and it might be only the speed, be only how much range do we certainly have in there, or is the engine still working, or do we have the handbrake on? So some very, very key focus areas that we need to look for. Now, the second part here is that in the KPIs, we also need to make sure that they focus on the strategic and operational improvement aspect. So we need to be sure that we actually measure what is important here. So for example, in the top, we would have a family car where you don't want to run out of gas, for example, and you don't want to get into a speed trap and run or kind of like run too fast. On the bottom, we have a performance car, in this case, a Porsche Cayenne. So in this case, you would actually want to have more that the engine is not kind of like over revving, because that is something that would be kind of like in the health of the engine, specifically for that particular operational environment or strategic environment. So your KPIs should be geared towards what you really try to achieve and try to show. Now, you ultimately, with your KPI system, try to create an analytical basis for your decision making. So yes, you actually monitor a lot of the underlying indicators, but you only bring up the key ones in the context of what you try to do in order to take the right decision, in order to achieve an intended result that comes from your strategy and your operational environment. And that actually makes the whole thing in kind of KPI management really tricky, because when we're looking at it, we have three different types of data that we can have in there, or there's many more indicators or KPIs, but I'm concentrating right now in this context on three only. The first one is operational data, which is kind of like the pure fact you have in your organization. The first one is the hard facts, therefore, your performance data, your processes, like the number of transactions, the time to process, capacity information channels. And that data is inherently neutral. It doesn't matter it's good or bad to have a certain number of complaints, a certain number of transactions, a certain number of cycle time. The data is inherently neutral, you just measure it. However, what ultimately comes up from this operational data is that your quality management systems have certain performance review on it. So service quality data or quality data looks at the performance of that particular process against a standard or against a target. So that means that you actually make observations whether the transaction is inside or outside a certain defined standard. So kind of like your quality audits, your mystery shopping, your service levels that you kind of like look to. And then you actually say, is it good or not? Because you put a certain success rate on it, and then you measure against it, is the success rate good or not? The third type of data is what I would refer to the customer experience data or your voice of the customer. Now, this is a little bit tricky because it's really the customer reaction to an outcome from the outside. And you can very often only indirectly receive this information because you rely on the customer to give you his feedback through surveys or whatever it would be. So in other words, you actually ask the customer, how does he feel? How does he actually think you have accomplished against that particular target? And because that is emotionally much or potentially underlined with your terms and conditions or driven by the persona or the respective transaction situation, the data is inherently flawed. You will never get 100% accurate data from a customer. Let me get 100% accurate data from the customer, but it might be the information that you want to have or that you expected. Because you cannot evaluate at that particular moment what filter the customer was reviewing this through. If the customer had trouble outside or maybe just a car accident outside your branch and when he was coming over to your branch, and therefore he's very stressed out, he's in a complete different frame of mind when he actually experiences a certain transaction from your end than where you say it's like, well, the transaction was exactly as per standard quality measures say 100% okay. So the emotional filter of the customer is always influencing it. So that means that when we look at the typical KPIs like Net Promoter Score, customer satisfaction, transaction satisfaction, customer effort score, and so on, they're always through the lens of the customer. And in order to interpret it and understand, is it correct or not, actually requires to fully understand who the customer is and what the customer was actually answering here. It means when we're actually looking at KPIs and at the data, we need to understand what are we really looking at. Are we looking at the company view or are we looking at the customer view? Are we looking at the operational data, the facts? Are we looking at an interpretation of the facts against, for example, the standard, against by the organization? Or are we actually looking at an unfiltered or maybe filtered interpretation of the feelings of the customer? So that means when we need to interpret now our KPI system, irregardless whether that's because of COVID or before, we need to understand, are we actually looking at the inside view where we evaluate our internal data and put, let's say, an interpretation on our internal data, or do we get an outside view by the customer? And unfortunately, our KPI systems are very often mixing any of that information up, and we're kind of like interpreting and we're putting an over-reliance on operational facts, where instead we might want to listen more to the details of the customer, what he's really trying to tell us. And therefore also need to evaluate, are we asking the right customers? Are we asking the right, in the right situation and the right state of mind? So the question that really comes up here, and this is already a problem that we had for years in customer experience management, and many of my clients were struggling in putting up a functioning CX KPI and MAS system in the first place. But how can we actually do this now? Well, one step back is actually to look at what customer experience actually means and how, therefore, can we measure this. So let me give you a little bit of a, let's say, controversial viewpoint. This is my definition on customer experience. My definition of customer experience actually says that it's the customer experience is the emotional reaction of a customer to a perceived gap or lack thereof, so no gap, between the company's promise and what actually was delivered by the company. It's a little complicated. I mean, I'm an academic by nature, so let me kind of make this a little bit more accessible to you guys. So first of all, we look at the company and the customer. The company promises something and then delivers against that promise. The customer evaluates, is what the company promised me perceived as equal to the delivery, or is it different? But the customer experience here is not the factual review of promise versus delivery, but rather the emotional interpretation of that gap. So that means really customer experience is the feelings that get triggered, the reaction that the customer has on this. And again, the feelings can be influenced by many different aspects, whether the customer just had a fight, whether he had an accident, whether he has a happy day, whether he just won kind of like in a drawing, whatever it might have been. So the idea here is that if we truly want to measure customer experience, we need to move a little bit away from the fact-based approaches and embrace that the customer has feelings too. And the feelings will ultimately be what the customer is sharing with others and what he actually bases his, let's say, a financial transaction or a purchase decision or kind of like a feedback decision on. So let me give you an example on this one, why this is a problem. When a company goes out and your KPI systems ultimately measure that to say, what are we promising? Are we delivering against it? So the delivery will be your operational numbers. And the promise against that is kind of like where you check, is it really matching up or not? So an organization continues to deliver what they promised in the past. So you might be as consistent as you want to be. The issue here is that the internal goals and objectives have not been updated to the new situation. Why? Because A, changes take place all the time, but we cannot, or it's really hard to change our KPI systems every month. Then the data becomes unreliable because we don't see trends behind it. And now with COVID is really the question that we're all facing is like, what should we change this to? The next question then is when the KPI are measured against the old sets of goals and objectives, then we have no way of evaluating have we made progress towards the new sets or not. Here comes then the customer. The customer through COVID and the new normal has a strong emotional reaction. And we just saw that the customer is significantly impacted. There's a complete shift in what is important and emotional for the customer. So that means that the customer needs and expectations have changed. And therefore, we now need to look into that the old KPIs reflect the true perception of what the customer is really looking for. So we can continue to deliver against the promise that was there. The interpretation, the feeling the customer has against that have changed. So for example, do you have measures in your new KPI systems on how well the customer perceives the cleanliness of your branches? It was a measure probably before, like, is it clean? But now clean means something completely different to the customer, and there's much more emphasis on that particular KPI. So that means that most KPIs that were operational or service quality driven have already been not customer experience KPI driven or customer experience driven. But now this is exponentially getting worse because the shifting in the customer's expectation is completely catching us off guard. Now, let's take the Net Promoter Score as an example out here. And probably all of you guys have the Net Promoter Score as one of the measures. Now, I'm not a great fan of the Net Promoter Score. It serves its purpose, but so there's purposes that the Net Promoter Score can do, but there are also very strong limitations on what the Net Promoter Score can do. So for those that might be new to this one, it's literally the question on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely would it be for me to recommend an organization to my friend or colleague? So it's kind of like an emotional response. Do I feel comfortable enough to give this out to someone else? And then you take the response and you take the 0 to 6 as detractors, people that would actively negatively spread word. People that respond 7 or 8, they're neutrals, they're kind of like citizens, but they're not doing anything. And 9 and 10 are the active promoters there. We'll probably need to do another session on this one alone, but what ultimately happens here when you have your KPI data, What you're really measuring out here is that it's a measure of whether you have more positive than negative word of mouth in the market. And that can be through online channels, that can be through personal meetings in a majlis or at a family celebration. So it can be virtually anywhere. Now, the problem here is, if we would compare, for example, our NPS data set from fourth quarter last year to the second quarter this year, which obviously had been impacted by COVID, the data could virtually look like those two charts. And when I asked people, which one would you prefer, this chart in A or the chart in B, very often people actually say, I would prefer B because I have more absolute fans of my department, of my brand or my product, and I can actually fix those people that are kind of like having a problem out there because I can ask them where the problems are. Well, fair enough. I would still prefer A. And the reason behind it is that in here, the NPS is actually both of them have an NPS of 28. So the NPS has not changed over time. So your KPI might say everything is pretty much the same and there's no problem out here. But if you take the average, the weighted average of those responses from the customers, they have dropped from an average of 8.13 to 7.21. And that's scary because it means that customers on average respond lower to the question whether they would respond to friends and family. So that means while there are already inherent issues with the measurement, we're now losing even more validity of this particular information content because we're not asking the questions. What is it that matters to you? So we're not getting the right information. Do we ask the right customers actually out here? And very often the answer to that one is no. We're kind of like just asking the customers that do interact with us, but not the overall customer base. The question here also is, are we capturing the why a customer answered with a specific score, or if the feedback loop is actually prepared for those new answers? So what if the customer actually says, no, I'm not happy because last time I came in there, someone was not wearing a face mask? How do you actually capture that in your existing KPI system and your complaint management system? Do you have categories for that? Has that been set up? So cleanliness, social distancing, shift in channel utilization are very often not yet updated inside the KPI systems. So when we then go through, what are therefore the steps? How can we fix this? And the answer to that one is, well, it depends. The typical consulting answer. And probably those guys of you that I have worked with, they're laughing already because that was always my answer inside the assignments and when we worked together, because it really depends on your organization. But there are things that you can do and actually that you should do. So I brought this down into a couple of not easy steps, but steps that I believe are very necessary for you to take a step back and review in your organization. So the first step is reevaluate your corporate strategy. Are you actually still running the right business model? Are you actually selling to the right customers? Have the customer expectations so far shifted that you need to sell now to other customers? If you had a market before, is that market gone now? Because we saw in the statistics that the customers are now going for less discretionary spend and more into savings. So do you actually still have a market? And the organization needs to answer that question and therefore redefine, and that is kind of like the next step, who the new customers are that you really want to go for. And those customers, what are their new needs, wants, or which ones do you want to retain and which ones do you now want to attract? And there will be shifts in there. There are different customer groups that you have to go up, very likely, or the customers that you want to retain have different needs and expectations. Step number 3 then, you now need to go in and reevaluate in the change in the needs and expectations of those target customers, how that is actually affecting your service delivery and kind of like what you promised before and what you were delivering before. Which means, yes, you will need to do improvement projects, but the improvement projects might not be anymore in the speed of delivery, but rather in being able to open new channels. Maybe the changes have to be in more on the cleanliness side, or more on the communication side, or more on the friendliness side, or more on the empathy side with the customer. That you actually say, I do understand you have financial difficulties. Let's try to figure this out instead of opening a police case because you have a non-performing loan. So those are the new expectations customers have, and then the service delivery needs to be reviewed. Step number 4. Therefore, new goals, objectives, and targets have to be created. And only if you have new goals, objectives, and targets towards the customer group, you will be able to identify which indicators are actually the best ones, the key ones, to indicate the performance that you're actually on. So will you have a complete different set that you look at in regards to your dashboard? Absolutely. Think of like when you were a race car driver and it was all about speed. The only things that were interesting for you were actually the engine revs and the speed of the car. If you're now going for a family outing, potentially into the desert, and you're driving many hundreds of kilometers, maybe now the fuel consumption and the level of how much fuel is left in your car becomes more important. On the company's equivalent, that would be before you were in a growth market. Now you need to save cash, and therefore KPIs that are more driven around the cash flow and maybe performing or non-performing loans were more important. That brings us then to step 5. You need to make sure that the new and the remaining KPIs, ensure that the new remaining KPIs, A, are truly critical, B, that they're actually helping to focus on what matters most, and C, I'd focus on for the strategy and the operation movements that you're really going for. And lastly, that they, back on my computer, sorry for that, that they create an analytical base for your decision making. So going back to what I said earlier, it is actually not only an impact on our business, but it's a great opportunity for us to reset what truly is important or not. Any sensible CX manager will strongly review now the monthly or quarterly quality management deck, actually scratch out those KPIs that do not add any significant value in the information content for decision making. Right now, during the crisis, the one thing senior management is very often looking for is give me the right data so I can make the decision in which direction I want to drive the business, because we cannot continue on autopilot. Actually, everything has significantly changed. We have a new normal, and as customer experience professionals, we are the ones that actually define and specify out who the customers are, what their needs and expectations are, and which direction we really want to drive this. So that is kind of like a couple of steps that come in here. So I told you before in the spoiler alert, it's maybe not what you want to hear, but it's not as easy as just shrinking the KPI. This is actually so significant in the change that we need to look into the fundamental aspects of the business and realign CX more towards the business. And the KPIs then will be an output of that realignment and reassessment of what is important, what is not. So with that, let's go over maybe to some questions and answers. So what you might actually see, I don't know which screen you have in front of you right now. There's a question and answer section in here where you can write your question and answers in, or you can actually write your name in and I can unmute so that you can ask your question on this one itself. So there's 2 actually options out here and for you to ask questions. Walid, did I forget anything? In the meantime, people potentially write any questions in here. Did I forget anything? Or what's your take on this? Walid?
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, I'm with you. You can hear me? Good?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Mark. Informative, very highly effective. Really, the objective of doing this that my goal was that to show people that exactly the word you have said, it's an opportunity. A lot of people or organizations, let's say organizations in basic word, which are government and non-government, they are not taking objective of using this to really redesign how they do their business. It's embarrassing. We go through a lot of, let me give an example of a lady who's above 6 years old. She was my mother. She usually was not accepting that anybody to help her in any retail store. Now she will not enter a retail store if it was not clean, if nobody was really cleaning it and there is no social distancing. A lady who was يعني when she enters to any store, she speaks to everyone. Now this is very important for her, and that's a rule that she really takes over. Now this is a human being. Let us say, let's take it from from an organization perspective. As you have said, wrongly KPIs, it means wrongly decisions, it means wrongly investments, it means losses, if it means goals not achieved. That is one of the biggest issues.
It's quite interesting. There's actually a quote out there. I who initially said it, but it actually says there's nothing worse than making the right decisions on the wrong data. So
Yes.
you have like the false sense of security behind it. But this kind of like ties in to one of the questions that was in the question and answer. So it says out here, very good point on reviewing the changes. Should we work with strategic agility or resilience in this VUCA situation? And again, answer from my side is it depends. So yes, we need to act very agile to the current situation that is out there. We need to make sure that that obviously the business is not bankrupt over this situation, and we need to take a very, very strong view on, let's say, the long-term projects that we had running. Should we continue with them, or should we put them on hold? Should we kind of like clear funding? Should we make sure? I mean, many businesses literally work under cash as king right now. Should we kind of like be a little bit more cautious and therefore slow everything down and see what's happening? The partial answer to that one is yes, you need to be careful because there's nothing worse than not having a business half a year down the line. However, at the same time, we need to take a hard look at our strategy in itself, because we need to already now plan in which direction do you want to drive the business. I mentioned earlier Emirates Airlines. Emirates Airlines was always known for excellent customer experience and excellent service. But the thousands, or let's literally hundreds of thousands of passengers that have been disappointed so badly with the bad transactional and kind of like the overall crisis management that they had. I mean, understandable, they had a huge volume of transactions going through that they had to work on. But it was really, really disappointing for many customers on how just unorganized the whole process was going through, especially in regards to communication, especially in regards to keeping customers kind of like rest in this stressful situation where people were stranded, where people had plans and they needed to change over. So everyone was emotionally impacted. And Emirates, in my opinion, personal opinion, did not necessarily do a good job on this. However, if they would not only have reacted with agility here and kind of like very quickly put very strong manpower on there. I mean, Emirates put a lot of people on furlough or on short working order. Would it have been possible to kind of like take some of that workforce and actually put them into centers to kind of like help customers kind of like overcome this? The manpower was there. It was just not necessarily strongly or in the right way allocated. So could they have kind of like done differently in the short term? Yes. But long term, yes, they would have probably gotten a significant financial hit on this one, but it would have saved the brand. If I plan now for the future my travel, will I have the same trust into the brand? Will I have the same trust into the service half a year or 2 years down the line when I do my next travel, that I will actually go with one airline over the other? Or has actually the core of what the customer experience and kind of like the promise that was out there suffer so much that I will have a long-term effect on this brand? So that means that actually strategic decisions have to be taken now to say, yes, we take a short-term tactical hit, but we do it for the right reason long-term in order to keep the business afloat and to keep the brand value afloat, to make sure that we actually still have a business. So to give you again an example from the financial service sector out here in Dubai right now. So I work with 2 clients. One client actually said, we're not releasing any people. Yes, we put them on shorter work time, but we keep the salary levels higher. So we're not shorting everyone by 50%, for example, because we know that our success long term has to do with our people. So we keep the people because business will resume afterwards. We will need to keep this up. Is that a significant impact short term? Yes, but long term, they maintain the trust, they maintain the customer experience, they maintain the customer centricity. Another financial institution just came out and says that they're releasing close to 15% of the workforce because of the financial constraints. But they have not actually said which areas, who is impacted. A lot of customers now find out that their relationship manager, the one that they need in this time, has all of a sudden been released, and they find out through an out of office, I have left the bank, please contact someone else. So that means that the strategic importance or the long-term thinking is just not being kept. And that will have a significant impact on the future of the brands, that will have a significant impact and a very big shake up among who is being perceived, who comes out of this crisis stronger and who is not. And I do strongly believe that the organizations that still keep the strategy, the long-term view, and work on that and continue to work on that will be more successful than the ones that completely shift over into crisis mode and only concentrate on crisis mode. So I hope that is kind of like answering your question on this one. Any other questions or any other?
From my side, thank you very much. It was very clear. I don't know if anybody has other questions, because now if we are more than happy to handle them. One input that I would like to add in the full subject that we have here. Wajid Al-Ataybi is saying thank you on the chat. Thank you, Wajid, and it was a pleasure that you have attended. So one of the issues that really I would like to add is that customer experience is always until this day demeaned and under appreciated, and unfortunately a lot of organizations, let's say in the Gulf region, I'm not saying outside of there, are now for the past 3 years got recognized that this is something important. CEOs, heads are understanding the importance of something named customer experience. The beauty of it, we see a lot of our friends and colleagues who are now taking that lead and putting themselves in the shoes, which is really, as they say, a person who is drawing and writing on the rock here in Saudi, especially for customer experience people, because they are pushing from all sides and getting, as they say, not appreciated for their work. And at the end, really, customer experience is how you add value, how you differentiate yourself. Nobody is understanding that. They feel that customer experience is an operation. I hope that, inshallah, soon when me and you meet again, and either on a webinar or here, and we do a meeting here in Saudi together in Riyadh, and we invite everyone, that we will see the difference. The people understand how it makes the difference. You could see it in the vision of 2030. It's mentioned in more than one objective of 2030, that customer experience, patient experience is something that need to happen. Absolutely. So if the highest level of the government, highest level of the government is pushing for that, so everyone needs to understand that it has to happen.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, for example, the 2030 direction. In 2026, no one will care that there was a COVID in 2020, yet the targets and the goals will still be there. But if you lose out the customers now, and they're like a let's say a complete decline of service and the lose of or the loss of the trust with the client, you will to gain that back. So going back to kind of like the question, should we go into kind of like a task mode and kind of like the crisis mode, or should we stay strategy? You have to do both, and you need to realign very strongly, and you need to keep this up and running, because once you lose the trust with the customer, it will take forever, and very often the customer doesn't give you the chance again to gain that trust back. So that is kind of like the take from my side. So it's not only about the KPIs, but the KPIs are ultimately need to be adjusted in order to make the right decision and provide the information for the right decision on this one. So again, I hope that there are no other questions, I guess, coming up on this, but I hope that from our standpoint, we were able to provide you some information and some guidance. Of course, if you have any other questions, please do contact Walid or myself. And bottom line on this one is we're all in this together. We're customers, you are our customers. We have to get through this, and it's just the facts of life. But to put the head into the sand and not do anything is the worst thing that is behind it. So let's all together, let's keep the communication up and running. Let's make this world a better place and reduce the stress and the anxiety of our customers. Let's help our customers, because it's really about them, through those difficult times, and do the right thing for them. So that's pretty much from my end. Walid, back over to you, probably for the closing.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. Thank you everyone for attending. I hope that it was useful for you as for me personally. Please feel free to contact us anytime, anywhere. Mobiles are active. We are more than happy to support you, to reach out, emails, and wishing you all the best. Please keep on the good work that we are seeing now already. It's a challenge. This is our time. This is our era. This will make a difference. This is the time that we put our fingerprint on all what's happening. My regards to everyone. Keep safe, please, everyone. Take care. Keep distancing, and wishing you all the best, inshallah.
Absolutely. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you very much from my side as well.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. See you. Bye.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.